King Kong. Surely in the great pantheon of Hollywood movie monsters over the years, King Kong still reigns supreme. He's the great ape who revolutionized cinema in the 1933 film directed by Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack. It's an incredibly influential film, mainly because of Willis O'Brien's extraordinary special effects, the stop motion animation that brought a whole new dimension to movie-going and created a special effects industry which thrives and survives and endures and grows today. If it wasn't for King Kong in 1933 and Willis O'Brien's fantastic revolutionary special effects, we wouldn't have the films we have today. We wouldn't have these CGI films. We wouldn't have these huge, explosive, blockbuster films, because King Kong started it all. And perhaps not surprisingly, there's something so fascinating about this story, this primal creature lurking in a forest, massive 40-foot monstrosity that's drawn filmmakers back to him again and again. And I'm not talking so much about the current King Kong films where he battles Godzilla and it's all motion capture and it all feels a bit soulless. For me, the last great King Kong film was Kong Skull Island, which started the whole monsterverse which we suffer today. But King Kong himself, apart from lots of spin-offs and rip-offs and so on, there have been three versions of the original King Kong story over the years. And King Kong 1933 is still the biggest and the best, of course. And we may look back at it today and we may wince at the primitive special effects. Certainly younger viewers would wince at the primitive special effects. The graphics are terrible, but this was all done manually, moving this maquette creature, moving it bit by bit and photographing it. And fantastic special effects techniques, which can't be beaten by today's CGI. I don't care what you say. And of course, King Kong returned in 2005 with Peter Jackson's superb remake of the original. But in the middle of all this is a version of King Kong that isn't quite so well regarded. This is the version from 1976, directed by John Guillermin, which I've not seen for decades. And I mean decades. But I've seen it again this week. Here are my thoughts. Welcome back. Yes, King Kong 1976. Whoa! Back the truck up. Before we start talking about King Kong 1976, I just want to say a big thank you to some new subscribers who've come aboard over the last few days, which have tipped me nicely over 1,600 subscribers, but we can do better. So what I'm saying is, if you're new here, if you've stumbled across this video because you like giant monkeys, and let's face it, who doesn't, why not stick around? Why not press that subscribe button? There, press it, just click on it. You can like, you can leave a comment, thumbs up and all that sort of stuff. If you subscribe to this channel, or any YouTube channel, or most YouTube channels, it doesn't cost you a penny. It's not like a subscription to a TV service. You don't pay for anything. I do the work and you just sit and watch it. And it is interesting to note that although things have improved a little bit, I think it's now less than 70% of my viewers are subscribers. It would be nice to get a few more of you who subscribe and watch. But the main thing is just to subscribe. Apparently the analytic likes it. I don't know what the analytic is. I don't know where it is. It might be around me. It might be in this room at the moment. But apparently it's good for the analytics if you subscribe and like. So go on, just do that. Go on. You know you want to. Right, back to King Kong. King Kong 1976. I'm very grateful to my friend and subscriber Andrew Dexter, who asked me if I would consider doing a video of this over Christmas. He left me a message. And he has particular family memories of going to see this film with his father in, I think, a local cinema in his hometown, which no longer exists. Cinema, not the hometown. And I thought, yeah, that's quite interesting because I do like me a bit of King Kong. And the 1976 version isn't well regarded and people point and laugh at it as the poor relation. But I thought, well, I haven't seen this for ages. Let's have a look and let's make up my own mind. I mean, I saw it probably in the late 70s, but I've never felt the need to revisit it. And I think it's only fair to give things another chance, especially decades later. So I fired up a copy of King Kong and actually rather enjoyed it. The film is set, obviously, in the 1970s, and it stars Charles Grodin as Fred Wilson. He's an executive of the Petrox Oil Company. He forms an expedition based on infrared imagery, which has revealed a previously undiscovered Indian Ocean island hidden by a permanent cloud bank. He believes that the island has a huge deposit of oil. This is interesting because the film actually reflects the 1970s oil crisis, so it's quite contemporary in the way it picks up on that theme and spins round the original story of Kong and gives the expedition a new reason for going to the island that we know from the original King Kong as Skull Island. Of course, in the original film and in Peter Jackson's remake, Carl Denham is travelling to the island to make a film. But this is a nice contemporary 1970s spin on that idea. I think it works rather well. Meanwhile, Jack Prescott, played by Jeff Bridges, playing an early version of the Dude from The Big Lebowski, he's a primate paleontologist. He sneaks aboard the expedition's ship and attempts to warn the team against travelling to the island. He cites an ominous final message about the roar of the greatest beast from previous doomed explorers to the island. En route to the island, the expedition rescues a dinghy that has been drifting in the ocean. Its sole occupant is the vivacious Duan, screen debut appearance from Jessica Lange. She's an aspiring actress and socialite who was aboard a director's yacht and suddenly exploded. Duan brings some much-needed glamour to the expedition, which eventually reaches the island. Voyaging ashore, the expedition finds a tribe of natives carrying out a tribal ritual in front of a huge wooden wall. The old deposit on the island turns out to be unusable, but during the night a group of natives capture Duan from the ship and prepare to sacrifice her to their god, the giant ape Kong, who emerges from the jungle and takes her back to his lair. Jack mounts a perilous expedition to rescue her from the clutches of Kong, who's taken a bit of a fancy to her, perhaps not surprisingly. Eventually, Kong is captured and taken back to New York to be put on display with, well, tragically familiar consequences. I have to say, I read some of the comments about this film and I read some of the old reviews, and this is a good film. This is not what I expected. Doing some research into it, I noticed that the scriptwriter, Lorenzo Semple Jr., said that they were going to play more towards comedy and camp it up a little bit, which probably wouldn't surprise people at the time because, of course, one of the things that Lorenzo Semple Jr. is best known for was writing, or being involved in the writing, of the Batman TV series, and they don't come much campier than that. And probably contemporary viewers must have been dreading what they were going to get from King Kong, thinking it was going to be played for laughs, high camp, silly shenanigans, and not taking itself seriously. But far, far from it. This is quite a deadpan, straight-up reimagining of the original King Kong story. Of course, the main change, as I indicated, is that the expedition isn't travelling to the island to make a film. They're going there to find resources of crude oil. And that's an interesting difference. As I said, it does contemporise the film, but the rest of it does really very much follow the through line that we're familiar with from Kong stories. And by and large, it does it with a pretty straight face, and very dramatically, and very commendably, because I really enjoyed watching this film. It was 2 hours of gripping entertainment. They go to the island, Kong appears, he grabs Duan and disappears into the jungle. And we have to talk about Kong, of course, because he's the star of his film. And it's an interesting one, because the original plan with this remake was that Kong would be realised by a big 40-foot animatronic creation that was the work of Carl Rambaldi, a well-known special effects technician at the time who worked on these sorts of mechanical effects. Unfortunately, the creature on set proved to be completely unworkable. I think you see 2 very quick flashes of the creature in the film, and it does stand out as something that isn't what we've seen in the rest of the film, because it just stands there like a statue, really can't do anything. Kong himself is actually played by special effects guru Rick Baker in an extremely impressive ape costume, and it is hugely impressive for a man in a gorilla costume. We're so used to seeing silly comedy sketches with gorilla costumes and other cheaper horror films with very obviously a man wearing a very poor gorilla mask loping about the place. But Rick Baker gives this creature a believability to it. And that's mainly because of some really good special effects shots. The shots that combine the giant-sized Kong and Duan, for example, and other smaller characters that are around in smaller sets and so on. It does look very good, mainly because the ape mask is very good and very expressive. There are lots of scenes of the film where Kong has to emote, and that was done by different faces on different masks. They couldn't build it all into the same mask. This is the early days, really, of animatronics. So they had a number of different ape heads that could do different things, particularly one sequence where he blow dries Duan when she's been soaked in a lagoon. We'll come to all that sort of stuff in a minute. It's a very, very good realisation of Kong, and almost immediately I forgot that I was watching a man in a monkey suit. I don't know what research he did into ape movements and so on, but it looks really good, and the whole costume is very effective, bearing in mind that it's a monkey suit. But it's really very well done. It's certainly the best I've seen of this sort of thing, because mainly I think that mask is very expressive. The face is so expressive, and it makes Kong look as if he's feeling things and in pain and in confusion. And I would say that visually, the film, all these years later, stands up incredibly well. Of course, there's no CGI here. This is all practical. It's so much the better for it. It looks great. There were very few times when I thought, ooh, bit of dodgy green screen there. There's a couple of scenes in the jungle when Jeff Bridges' expedition is travelling into the jungle. It looks quite studio-ish. The set looks quite studio-ish, and it's obviously an interior. And there's a couple of shots, green screeny things that, yeah, they do stand out a bit. But in terms of the perspective with Kong and humans, it looks fantastic. It looks so good. I think probably the disappointment for a purist is that we don't get to see a lot of what's going on the island. In the original, there are dinosaurs. In Peter Jackson's, there's all sorts of creepy crawlies, dinosaurs, giant insecty things. In this, we just get a draft excluder as a snake which attacks Kong in one sequence, which actually isn't as bad as it sounds. And it's particularly gruesome when he sort of grabs its jaws and rips it open and all this tendrils of blood and gunges inside. So it's disappointing that we don't get to see anything else that's on the island, but that's always been a bonus in Kong films because ultimately it's about Kong, and it's about Kong and the girl, Dwan. And this is where I think some of the criticism is probably justified. I think those sequences where Kong has taken Dwan into the jungle and he's lifting her up. And again, there's a very good animatronic hand that moves. You can see the fingers and the thumbs moving. It looks so good. And she's cradled in its hand. And I think maybe here, this is where the script does the film no favours, because you've got this famously cheesy and silly dialogue when she's communicating with the ape. And she calls him a male chauvinist pig ape. And she's talking to him about star signs. Oh, I'm a Virgo, or I'm an Aries. What are you? The ape's not going to communicate that sort of information. And she would know that. And it just seems incongruous, those particular bits, because the rest of the film is so good and so straight. It is a shame that they went down that road and had that sort of rather silly dialogue with her. But that's really the only negative I have in terms of the script and the characterisation and the atmosphere of the film. It's all really very well done. The story moves on then that after Jack has rescued Dwan, King Kong has obviously taken a fancy to her, and you get those slightly silly, risque sequences where he's trying to pull her clothes off and blow dries her when she's been in the lagoon. It's quite amusing. But eventually they capture Kong by knocking him out. He falls into a pit and they chloroform him. And they take him back to New York, and Fred Wilson, now having realised that the oil supply is no good, he's decided to make some of his money back by putting this giant ape on display. And of course, as in the tradition of King Kong films, Kong is captured, but he sees Dwan and he breaks free and he goes on a rampage. And there's some really good stuff there. There's a scene where he derails and demolishes a train. It's all done with models, and it's sort of obviously models, but it's done very well. It's atmospherically lit. The models are really good. And there are some really nice scenes that recreate scenes from the original film, where you see Kong peering in through a window. He spotted Dwan indoors and he's peering in through a window, which is one of the most memorable and terrifying images from the original King Kong film, a film which incidentally I remember so well watching it when I was a kid. The impact it made on me, and it's made me fall in love with monsters. Almost really that particular scene as well, where it's climbing up the Empire Building and you see its eyes looking in. That sort of blew my mind as a child, and I'm so pleased they recreated it here. And then you get the shot of the hand coming in and grabbing Dwan, leading to the epic finale on top of the World Trade Center. That in itself is quite poignant, of course, because of what has happened since with the World Trade Center. Talk of the South Tower and the North Tower, and it is quite, it brings you up a moment. It reminds you of what happened in 2001, and yeah, it's quite striking to see the building used in that way. And the end is as tragic as ever. And in fact, I think it works really well again in this film. You've got to know Kong as a character, and you really feel for him, and you understand what he's going through, his confusion of being in this strange place. And there's a very nice counterpoint with the World Trade Center, because in the jungle we've seen these two sort of spires that are standing out in the jungle, and the suggestion that Kong has remembered that and thinks it's home, and that's why he's climbed up the trade center. And of course he gets attacked, he gets shot, he falls to the ground. And it is particularly sad again at the end, because we like Kong. Kong is a monster, but he's not bad, he's not evil. He's been taken out of his own environment by the hubris of humanity and put through this terrible ordeal, and suffers because of it. And it's really very sad at the end when Dwan appears at his side. She's got down from the top of the World Trade Center pretty damn quickly, by the way. And Kong is there and he turns his head to her and they impose over the soundtrack the sound of his heart beating and slowing and slowing. And his eyes, you see his eyes, you see the light going out of his eyes as he passes away. It's really very tragic. It's as effective as the 1933 film and probably more effective for me than the 2005 film, bearing in mind I haven't seen it for a while. I thought this was a great film in every way. I thought the script was really good, apart from those couple of little wobbles. The effects are great, the production values are great. It's one of those films that really hasn't aged as badly as you might think, bearing in mind that the 70s films do tend to show their age quite a bit. I think the King Kong 1976 looks great and is still a great film. I don't know what the contemporary view of it was. I know that the critics were a bit sniffy towards it. But I think it's a really good, powerful and effective retelling of the Kong story. It is I'm going to say worst of the three, but not in a bad way. Obviously the classic is what it is. Peter Jackson's version is incredible, but this does not disgrace King Kong in any way. It is a great film in its own right. I would advise you to try and catch it if you can. I think it's just been re-released on Blu-ray. And I think it's well worth picking up because honestly, it's a damn good 1970s monster movie. And I think the time has treated it very well. It did fairly well at the time at the box office. I think it cost about $26 million to make. And it made just over $90 million. I think at the time, this was 1976. Previous year, of course, Jaws had redefined what everybody thought of as blockbuster cinema. And I think that Dino De Laurentiis, the producer, might have been expecting a similar sort of box office haul. But the film, although it made a significant profit, it wasn't the massive, huge blockbuster it was expected to be. But that doesn't stop it being a damn good film, and I think it's worth your time taking a look at it if you can. It's King Kong from 1976. As a side issue, there was a sequel, also directed by John Guillermin, which arrived 10 years later, King Kong Lives. But I'm not going to talk about that. I think I have seen that many years ago, and let's not talk about that. Let's leave it at King Kong 1976, which I'm going to give a big fat 8.5 out of 10. 8.5 out of 10. It's terrific entertainment. Thank you again to Mr. Andrew Dexter for suggesting that I watch this film. I'm so glad you suggested it. I'm so glad I've watched it because it's great. That's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. As I said at the beginning, please like and subscribe to the channel. We do loads of retro stuff, lots of films, loads of TV. There's loads of stuff to come in the next few months. I was going to say years, you never know. Plenty of Doctor Who stuff too. It's a bit quiet on the Doctor Who front at the moment because obviously show isn't back for a little while. But of course there will be reviews of new episodes and merchandise and stuff. So stick around. And I'm hoping, as I've said before, to do a few more out and about-y things during the year, so you don't get sick of seeing this backdrop behind me all the time. So anyway, that's it for now. I hope you will stick around. Like, subscribe, leave a comment down below. I'll see you soon. Until I do, keep taking the stuff.